my 7-day addiction.
So I take it you don't go fishing in the cold
Actually, we do. Yeah.
weather. Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Damn.
We'll talk about that a little bit. So it looks like we're live here. So welcome everybody to the Art of Fishing show. This is episode 7. Today, actually, our show is all about sharing the passion and love of fishing. And today we got a really interesting guest. I mean, some of you guys saw our sticker or our flyer here where we were talking about where George was actually fishing with a whale shark, and we'll talk about that more in a little while. But today's guest, we've got George Brown, and he's really going to start introducing us and giving us an overview of spearfishing, and specifically spearfishing in Texas. I mean, prior to seeing George out here, I hadn't really seen anyone out here. So George, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a Valley native. My name's George Brown. I'm 28 years old. Originally, I was born in Mexico City. My parents were living down there for my dad's work, but he got restationed in Matamoros. So at the age of 2, I moved to the Valley with them, and I grew up here in Los Fresnos, Texas.
Okay, so close to the water, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, relatively close to the water. Spent a ton of time going out to the island. A lot of my parents' friends were fishing guides, so that really helped. And a couple of my parents' friends were surfers, and they got me into surfing.
Here at Saltpeter as well too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's another scene too. I mean, like a lot of people, we talk about the bays and the beaches here, but most of this, it's like wade fishing and getting in the bay and targeting fish like that. So, so it's really like you've seen a lot of different things. Actually, there's parasailing out there, so there's a lot of things that go on here locally. So,
yeah. So David Leal was actually my dad. Still is my dad's really good friend, and he's a good fishing guide out there on the islands, pretty well known. And his son Josh and I are about the same age, and so Josh and I started growing up on the island together, hanging out at his dad David's house and going bay fishing with him all the time. And his dad got us really into surfing. And then in the summertime, when it would start to get flat and calm and really blue water pushed in, he had a couple Hawaiian slings, is what they're called, these pole spear-like things. And he would just have them at his disposal for us to use and go mess around with. So that was how I really, really first started getting into it.
how old were you when that happened?
I was probably early high school.
Okay.
Maybe 14, 15
But
years
you were
old.
doing that. You were doing that like actually diving in the water, or you were doing it from the top of the water?
Yeah, we would go to the jetties when it would be really calm and clear. And we would go with just snorkeling gear, sometimes just a mask. We wouldn't even have fins. And usually, typically, when the water is that clear, there's not a lot of current.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have seen it when the jetties are just super slicked
Yes,
off.
yeah.
We just get in, and I definitely had some buddies that shot some game fish, which is totally illegal, and you're not supposed to do.
Okay, so we'll touch on that here about what species you can here a little bit later here.
And, we got a couple good reprimandings from the dads that were fishing guides. And,
You ever get busted by the game warden?
no, not as
But
kids.
the dad was good enough to get you off.
Yeah, you got you
the
squared away,
dads
so-
got us pretty squared
Usually
up right away.
that can be worse, right?
Yeah,
Your parents-
right. Especially if you caught bigger fish than Dan. Dan is like, now you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that, son. Stop doing it. Stop catching. Out fishing me.
Catching more, yeah.
So growing up, so jetties is kind of the really where it starts for spear fishing, I guess. It
beginning.
really is kind of like that. I guess there's something about the atmosphere there where there's rocks, there's enough structure there, and then it's not incredibly deep. I guess there's a lot of traffic there. I guess is one thing to kind of be worried about. So
Yeah, there's, stay away from the center of the channel. That's the main thing I can say. But, and you'll know pretty well off right away if it's going to be clear enough to go in and spearfish. But, those days where you see the rocks going down underwater and you can see the fish right there from the surface, 5 or 10 feet below the surface, those are the really good days to go and try.
For those days, you take these type of guns, or do you take the...
No, pole spear works really good, or we use a little bit shorter guns than these ones.
So I guess let's show us here what the equipment we
show
have
those
here. I guess
toys,
that's a
man.
good point. Yeah, you've got definitely got a table full of stuff here. That's cool stuff.
Yeah, so these are both 52-inch American-made guns by a manufacturer called Kowa. They're out of Florida. Very, very reputable manufacturer of spear guns. They've been doing it for a long time, and
They're wood, huh?
yeah, they're teak wood. So typically guns are made out of a padock wood, mahogany wood, or teak wood. And my personal preference is teak. It's the hardest, most resilient to the water damage, and it's also the heaviest, which helps combat the recoil from the guns. So it kind of makes them a lot more accurate when they're real heavy.
Nice.
And these two are both set up differently. This one is what we would call a reel gun because it has this reel on it. And this one is what we would call a breakaway float line setup. So right here, a little bit further down, you can see how,
It breaks away, huh?
yep, that'll come unclipped right there.
Okay.
And we would typically hook one like this on a breakaway float line to what we have here as a float line.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
And so we usually use these guys for the larger pelagic species like amberjack.
Something you don't want to physically tie onto yourself. Something that has some
Exactly.
power to it, right?
Yeah, wahoo.
Yeah.
You know, those are really notable ones around here.
Reds.
You're not supposed to shoot at reds.
Can't shoot reds.
Sorry. I meant snapper, maybe red snapper. I don't know.
Yeah, you can use it for red snapper.
See?
It's
Red
not
snapper,
a game
bro.
fish. But
So what's your range with either of these guns? I mean, how close
Cool looking guns. Huh?
how close can you get to a fish and be within striking range with these?
about 10 or 15 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll get really familiar with your distance, your shooting distance on the guns. You know, you'll when you start really using the guns heavily, you'll know, kind of have a gut instinct when you're close enough, and you're going to be able to hit the fish in a humane way where you're going to be able to land it. You know, you don't want the shaft tearing out or just barely nicking the fish. It's just
Okay.
not good.
Yeah, so this is about 10 feet, kind of way. And how far can you can you see the fish from? How far out?
Quite a long ways. I mean, it's always dependent on the water visibility, but around here in the summertime, I typically don't dive the jetties if it's not 10 feet or better.
Okay.
10-foot viz or so. And then offshore, usually 20-foot viz or better.
Okay.
So, you know, these aren't my guns I use at the jetties. I'll use a shorter gun with about a 5 or 10-foot range. So, you know, basically we can shoot half our visibility range,
Okay. Yep.
at a minimum. However, we do get really, really blue days where it'll be like 40 or 50-foot viz.
Wow.
And when you're out there, like, are you targeting something specific, or are you just swimming around seeing what's coming by? Are you stalking them? Like, how does that work?
That's a good question. So I get that a lot. You know, do we just go to the middle of the ocean and jump in and look for fish? Typically, no. One of my best friends on the boat is the down scanner, just like for fishing. You know, if we see a lot of marks on the down scanner, we can usually decipher what's bait and what's bigger fish. That's a great cue as far as that's a good place to dive. And then the down scanner also picks up wrecks and reefs and, you know, the artificial reefs. So we see the bottom structure on those down scanners, and we know how active the bottom is, and how big that structure is, and what the depth is on the, you know, just before even getting in.
So what depth are you looking at? You know, where the fish are at, so where you're like, hey, I can dive 20 feet and be okay.
You said you're a free dive, right?
Yeah, so we're all free diving. And it really just depends on your ability as a free diver, your breath holding and all that practice. I am pretty advanced. I can hunt at about 90 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, how long can you hold your breath, or how long do you have to hold your breath to be able to dive 90 feet?
My static breath hold is 5 minutes and 26 seconds.
Wow.
Damn. You got me beat by like 5 minutes.
And 26
And 25 seconds.
On a good day.
So I imagine you practice
try- I'm
that.
gonna
You
try
just
right
kind
now,
of work on doing that as part of what you do.
Yeah, I practice it. I've taken a free diving course, or a couple free diving courses with a gentleman out of Austin, Texas, and his name's Philip. He runs a freediving course called Freediving Texas.
Okay.
And he gives you a lot of good advice. YouTube gives you a lot of good advice. There's a guy named Adam, the freediver, that's like a competitive freediver, and he gives a lot of his tips on how to go deeper and have longer breath holds. Really good stuff. Just sitting on your couch in the living room too. Practice freediving.
Practice freediving.
Yeah, practice your breath holds.
Or when your wife's fighting with you, you just
Till you pass out.
getting good at this.
Yeah. You got to do that.
I'm just kidding, babe. I'm just kidding. I'll hold my breath.
So,
Yeah.
so you primarily out of South Padre Island is where you're coming out of, and how far out are you guys going? I mean, you talked about 90 feet, so I guess that's what, maybe 15, 16 miles out.
Yeah, right around the state water line. So I can only guide to the state water line. I mean, we can free dive past it, but it becomes a really difficult harvesting fish, trying to target fish. There's only very certain limited number of species of fish that we can target
In
past
federal water?
In federal waters. When I'm just going for fun as a recreational dive or trip, we can go into federal waters. It's just on the for hire trips, the guided trips. So.
So guided trips are only state water.
So only
What
state
kind
water.
of fish do you target when you take people out? Is there like a certain, like cobia or whale
Yeah.
sharks?
So we can't target cobia in state waters because they are game fish. So the most highly sought after ones are going to be like mahi, tuna. Those are the two pelagic species, and I guess amberjack is a kind of a reef or a pelagic species. They migrate in and out a lot, so we get those three fish pretty common, and then the reef species that we target a lot are mangrove snapper, red snapper, gag grouper, and Kubera snapper. So a lot of pretty big offshore reef species that we target as well.
What's the biggest fish that you've shot at here in our state waters?
A couple 60 or 70 pound amberjack probably.
Yeah. I mean, I fought an amberjack on a reel, and I can just it almost about pulls you in. I can't imagine what you. So you're shooting it with the free line, and how do you just hold on to it, or you just kind of?
Yeah.
You use this gun and this setup for those type of fish.
Yeah. Typically you use a float line. That's what I would recommend at least. Use a float line. That's what I would recommend very highly to anybody wanting to shoot an amberjack, especially if you don't have a lot of experience doing it. You can switch over and use a reel gun to shoot an amberjack, but
You better hold on.
better hold on. Pretty scary stuff.
You better be able to hold your breath for 5 minutes.
At least 5 minutes. Right?
Yeah, you
At
get.
least.
I typically get a lot of worry and anxiety when I shoot the amberjack on a reel gun that it's going to get into the wreck and then break off the shaft.
Okay.
And then that fish is going to get away and suffer with that shaft in it. Probably, more than likely die. And then you also are down a gun because the gun loses its shaft and you can't use it anymore. So, yeah, I've landed some big ones. I've landed, I think, a 60 or 70 pounder on the reel gun before.
Wow.
And you kind of just have to try to get away from whatever reef or wreck you're spearfishing on. So that amberjack can't get down into the wreck because it beelines for it when
Yeah, it knows where to go. It kind of knows its safe spotting. Once you go home, it's just kind of with.
yeah
It's like catching a red. It goes straight for the prop.
yep yeah
Let me ask you a question. So you said you can hold your breath for about 5 minutes. So let's say you're in the water and you do see an amberjack, but you know that you've been in the water 3 minutes. Do you still shoot it knowing that I have only 2 minutes of breath, or do you say, hey, I'm gonna have to go up and then come back down?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You really have to just kind of have an intuition when it comes to it. If you're on the very, very last of your breath hold, just play it safe. That's the best thing to do. Go back up. That fish might still be circling around. If you throw some chum, or we use these big, they're basically shiny silver lures without hooks on them. And we hang them from the bottom of a float, and we usually hang them a good distance, like whatever the visibility range is above the reef.
Yeah.
So if it's 20 or 30 foot viz and where the reef is 60 feet down, we'll hang it at about 20 or 30 feet so that we can just barely see the flasher, and fish on that reef can just barely see the flasher above it. And it'll be about mid-water column. Okay. And so if you see a big fish like that, you know, it's best to play it safe and surface. Also, don't be greedy. Tell your dive buddy that you're with that you saw a big fish, and keep your eyes on that flasher or the chum. That you picked up.
Artificial chum.
Yeah, and a lot of times that fish will come into it. And if you do have a dive buddy, you know, you should always dive with a buddy. So you tell your dive buddy that you saw the fish and you actually aren't seeing it anymore. It's always a good idea to dive straight at that flasher. Those big predatory fish will actually, you know, even if they swam by that flasher and they checked it out and they kept going, if your dive buddy dives straight at that flasher, that the fish will often, it'll get triggered with like a, kind of like a curiosity.
A reactive type, like just like, hey, just
Yeah.
predatory. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they'll think, you know, I swam by that thing. I didn't really think it was anything good to eat, but that big, you know, predatory looking
It's coming at it.
thing is going right at it. So what did I miss? You know, and sometimes those fish will turn around and go right back to the, to the
Competitive.
flasher.
Yeah.
Competitive fish.
Yep.
So you mentioned communicating with your dive buddy. So I mean, I guess this is part of the training or part of the certification process where you learn how to say basic commands. I mean, obviously you can't hear each other when you're underwater, and so you just you have some sort of system to communicate with your buddy.
Yeah, so we typically just do like a thumbs up or an okay symbol like that. We also always do this like number that, you know, we watch each other. We want to have, it's called the 1 up, 1 down rule. So you always want to have one diver on the surface, breathing as much air as they can and being as relaxed as possible, and one diver that's actually in the process of free diving. And right before you initiate your dive, you know, you want to give them the I'm watching you signal. If the person that wants to dive, you know, if you haven't distinguished who goes first yet, you know, ask, point at yourself, you know, are you watching me or am I watching you? And then once that person, your dive buddy, tells you, commits to spotting you, or you commit to spotting them, we do what we call a breathe up on the surface. So it's just nice, long, slow breaths. And then we'll go into a dive. We remove the snorkel from our mouth, just in case of a blackout, because you have a reflex when you black out that will actually pinch your mouth and keep water from going into your lungs. So if you have a snorkel in your mouth, it acts as like an open passageway for water to flood your lungs. It can be really dangerous. So we remove the snorkel, and then we'll proceed with our dive, try to get to the bottom or wherever we feel comfortable in the water column, sitting and waiting to see if we see anything, and then we'll surface. And so as we're surfacing, we, you know, if you're in murky water, I really recommend diving with a float line like that, because as you surface, you can track that float line.
Okay.
And you'll know exactly where the person is coming up at.
And is it tethered to anything, or as you're diving, do you keep it up on the boat? Do you just, is it all in the water?
Yeah, we tether to a float like that.
Okay.
Only like this.
Mm-hmm. So you'll have a float like that on the surface, and there's a lot of big manufacturers that sell floats. The spearfishing companies, they sell floats. They look a little more professional than mine, but
That has some experience, man. It looks like several fish came at it.
it's gotten buried a couple of times. But yeah, so when you have a float like that, you can really track your dive buddy, and it's really amazing to me too that you can hear the shots go off. You know, even at 60 plus feet, you hear the shots go off underwater.
Really? Huh.
Oh man, that would be something. You
Really,
ever,
just
have
like-
you ever recorded where you hear the sound?
I can't say I have, no.
I would
Yeah.
imagine it'd be difficult to
That'd be
record too,
nice.
you know, with all the noise and kind of that
Yeah.
stuff out there, even with the GoPros. It's
Yeah, because I
imagine
think
pretty-
GoPro's like 30 feet only.
Yeah.
Yeah, I catch my own shots, you know. It sounds like pretty loud, like almost like a bomb or something, you know, when the bands go off. But other person's shots, I've never, you know, you often can't see them past 30 feet or so. So, you know, you never know when to like hit the record button unless you record the whole time, and then you're kind of just recording like blue water because you don't really see them.
Oh, there's some water. There's some more water over there. So where do we go
So-
from here?
So you never go alone. You always go with some. When you're going out there, you always go with somebody else.
Yeah.
And if you go with, let's say, 3 people, do you have only one spotter for both of them, or are they both 2 to 1?
No, you go into a rotation.
Okay.
So there's a diver, and then somebody that's spotting, and then the person that just came up from their dive is in like a recovery.
Okay.
And then, you rotate that. So once that diver surfaces, they go into recovery. The person that was in recovery goes into becoming a spotter,
Okay.
and the person that was the spotter goes into
So usually just one person in the water, fishing.
diving at
time,
one time.
yeah.
Yeah, and also, we typically don't ever take shots from the surface unless we have, sometimes I don't recommend it. It's dangerous, but sometimes you get like mahi that roll in out of nowhere, and they're usually always on the surface. So sometimes, like when an instance like that happens, you want to communicate really well. Make sure that your buddies know that you've seen a mahi or seen some mahi.
Up on top.
Yeah, and make sure that you guys are all really aware of each other's locations.
Yep.
But besides that, we don't ever really take shots from the surface, and we don't ever dive, tandemly, just because we don't ever want to get in each other's path when
Yep.
we're taking shots.
So I mean, so like going fishing in the bay. I mean, it's something like if you've never done it before, you could hire a guide and like, okay, we're gonna go and take my kids fishing, and they're gonna go, and they've never been out on the water. The guide's gonna show them, we're gonna do this, and whatever. He's gonna give them a little bit of briefing up there, and like, okay, we're gonna be safe. But this isn't something that you just say like, hey, I'm gonna call George because this
going
looks really
spearfishing
cool,
today.
like. Because, I mean, you have to know, like, there's just so much to it. So I guess that being said, I mean, like, do you have any kind of criteria or requirements for your clients before they come to you and say, hey, George, I saw you do this, and I saw you on Facebook or on
wanna
YouTube.
try it. I wanna
and I
try
want to try this. Will you take me out?
Yeah, so that happens sometimes, and I really appreciate the enthusiasm and people that want to get into the sport. I love to do it so much. So seeing people that have a desire to get into it too is it's really phenomenal. I love it. But it definitely does take time, and without a free dive certification, I typically will not go offshore. That's
Okay.
kind of my rule of thumb.
So, but when you say you won't go offshore, so you'll stay in the bay, or you'll consider kind of the jetties area on a good day?
We'll do like we can do a half day of spearfishing in the bay where it's like very shallow. We've got quite a number of spots actually where there's a pretty good amount of mangrove snapper. and
Okay.
It's usually always clear. So
And how deep is that? Where you're
it's like 3 or 4 feet.
okay, and where is it on the map? So just so we know.
It's just so we can keep notes.
Yeah, just so we know that you can. Yeah. So look, here's a map. Put an X on it.
So you say like visibility obviously is a important factor.
Yep.
So when they call you up for, let's say, a trip, so does it depend on the day? Do they say like, oh, I want to go fishing November 20th, and is it automatic November 20th, or do you have to tell them, okay, this is going to be possibly a good day?
Yeah, usually when people contact me, I recommend to them that they give me a window of opportunity that they're going to be, visiting the island or free to go. There's a lot of people that live in Texas or the Valley that are, they work a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. So if they can only go on weekends, I'll let them know. Well, if I see a good weekend, I can let you know coming up in the near future or whenever I see one. Or if there's people that are visiting the island, I asked if they have a desire to go, that they tell me when they're going to come, and they try to stay flexible. And I know that just is, for me, that gives them the best chance of going on a good day that's safe,
So if they're not diving, I mean, do you do just regular type guiding as well, like fishing off a boat with just conventional type?
I do. Yeah, I like to fish a lot for snook.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
You got a spot for that?
So,
I mean, we're gonna release them. 'Cause we're part of the catch and release.
yeah, we're
program.
part of catch and release, or Victor is now. So I haven't caught any fish since we.
Well, you've been releasing for a long time.
yeah, I have. So, but no, man, that's really cool. So your typical client then is someone that has some experience and has some sort of certification, and it sounds like they've done this before. Maybe they've gone with you, or maybe, I mean, earlier before we went live, you're talking about some of the clients, and it's like they share the same type of passion that you have towards spear diving or spear fishing. So kind of what is that connection with these guys? I mean, are they recurring customers that come out and people?
Yeah, I get a lot of recurring customers, but I get a lot of people that it's their absolute first time too, and I encourage it. I'm often, if they are open for picking a really good day, that's really good weather for it. I really don't mind going over a lot of the basics with them in shallow water, and once they kind of gain my trust a little bit, we'll venture out to the jetties or someplace where it's a little bit deeper, where you're actually, free diving per se, like breaking the surface and doing dives. And usually those days that are really, really calm, you can go offshore and it'll be no current, no wind, really clear water. Those are the things we look for.
So visibility, wind, and current are the big factors.
Yeah, and wind and current they go hand in hand.
Okay.
So if there's no wind, more than likely there's no current. And then, if there's no current and no wind, then the water is really still, and that usually is what's conducive to making the water really clear. So, you look for those really glassed off days. The days where the bay fishermen are like, man, it drove me crazy today. Like, we couldn't drift at all.
Yeah. It happens occasionally. So I like to run offshore too, and I'm running offshore. And those are the only days that'll go fishing. So where I go, if I can go offshore, it's like, yeah, all right, let's go fishing.
So let's say for somebody, let's say, people watching, let's just say they say, you know what, man, that's pretty interesting. I want to learn a little bit more about it. How would they contact you, or how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, so Facebook or Instagram. My guide service is called Texas Blue Water Rehab. I actually studied psychology to be like a counselor or a psychiatric nurse or something in psychology, and wasn't sure where I was going with that when I was at A&M, but I ended up graduating and then really loving the ocean and fishing and spearfishing, and so
Are you guiding full time right now?
I am, yeah. It was my first year actually guiding full time. So last year I worked.
Congratulations! A lot of people work toward that, and it's a big deal, right? A lot of people want that. Right? Like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to guide full time, and I'm going to fish every day. And I think a lot of people, when they start fishing every day, they're like, hey, it's work.
Yeah.
It's different. So, well, congratulations on being that. So we talked a little bit about the kind of like the fish that you hang out or that you're chasing, some of the gear you go in, and I guess like the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle for most people is just kind of some of the horror stories, if you will, some of the scary things out there. I mean, obviously there's sharks out there. I've seen videos where sharks come and attack. The spear gun or take a snap out of. Actually, just saw one last night. I was doing some research trying to figure out what was going on here. But maybe you can share some of your stories around some close calls, if you will, while out spearfishing.
Yeah, so I think that the two most dangerous things definitely are going to be a shallow water blackout or a blackout while freediving, which, knock on wood, I've never experienced one myself, never had one on the boat with a client or any of my dive buddies. So, kudos to everybody that has dove with me, that, they're well within their limits and being really safe. And, even if something were to happen, we always practice really precautionary things to what to do if something were to go wrong. So, safe diving has really kept us in the clear with situations like that, which I'm really thankful for. But the other thing besides shallow water blackouts is sharks, like you said. And I'm not sure exactly why, but typically out of South Padre Island, we don't see too many sharks. There's a lot of shark fishermen that catch them right on the beach like crazy. Yeah. And when you pull it behind the shrimp boats, which is a thing we often do, there's
I've seen them before, yeah.
Yeah, heaps of them behind the shrimp boats. So I know they're around, but a lot of the places we frequent to go spearfish, we don't typically see that many sharks.
So seeing the sharks, so like, all right, let's pack up or let's move, let's try a different spot, or you just kind of like, okay, there's a shark over there, just kind of watch him as he's coming over here.
Yeah, you work with their temperament.
Yeah, I get out of the water quick. I mean, like, you can stay, bro. I'm going to be like, I'm watching you get eaten.
Yeah, you work with them. So if they all have their attitudes, so if they're really being hyper aggressive and you know, it kind of bullying you around, acting like they're gonna come and hassle you for your fish.
It's time to.
Yeah, it's just time to pick up, go to a different spot.
Yeah.
And that happens quite a lot. But at the same time, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of times where we see sharks and they're perfectly well behaved. You know? They don't really bother you. They keep their distance.
And so, what's their distance? How close to a shark would you say is a safe distance?
So this might sound crazy, but sometimes
5 minutes and 20 seconds away. That's how safe you stay.
I don't think you can see 5 minutes and 20 seconds away.
sometimes this might sound crazy, but sometimes I actually try to film them. And if I'm trying to film them and they won't let me get close enough to film them, then that's a pretty well behaved shark. Or
Okay.
It's really nervous of my, you know, my. me
So if
being
he
there,
doesn't,
my
if he
presence.
doesn't let you film him, you feel comfortable.
I feel comfortable. Yeah,
If they
I feel
let
good
you-
shooting fish. Yeah, if they come in and they act like they want to eat the camera out of your hand, let it go.
And now, is there a particular species that you've encountered that is more aggressive than others? Is it the same species? Or?
It's usually always the bull sharks that are really aggressive, and the black tips, and then the hammerheads tend to be a lot more like better behaved.
What about on fish? Like just like a fish, like an amberjack, or what fish species that you're shooting at is, would you say, the hardest to catch or fights the best?
So we get this fish species called an African pompano, and that's a really prized catch on a spear gun.
Those are the little one they catch at the surf, right?
No, those are Florida pompano.
Oh.
So African pompano, we got one this past year, and it was 32 pounds. And
But they're just solid, I guess. Imagine. I mean, you've fought an amberjack, right? So, a 60-pound amberjack, how does that compare to a 30-pound pumpkin?
they fight pretty. I guess about a 30-pound amberjack would probably fight the
Okay,
same.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
they're not extremely hard fighters. per
So,
se.
just more like they're rare types.
Yeah, they're just really elusive. They don't like to come close enough to get a shot. They're this really amazing silver sheen, and in Japan and Hawaii they call them kagami, which actually means a mirror in Hawaii or in Japanese. So they call them mirror or mirror fish, kagami. But when you see them, they like my dive buddy refers to them as a white whale. They like come out of nowhere, you know, like a ghost almost. All of a sudden you see, you know, you think your mind's playing tricks with you, and then all of a sudden it's right there. And they have such huge features, like their eyes, their jaw. They're just like unbelievably, exaggerated in their features.
I'll have to
So
look one of those up right
I was
now.
about to say that.
Yeah.
yeah, so sometimes you see them and they're like 30 or 40 feet away in really, really clear water, and you're thinking, oh man, there's the fish right there. You know, there's the African pompano that I've been wanting to see forever. And you think it's like 20 feet away, and sometimes you take a shot at it and your shaft will just go and like stop and fall,
Wop, wop,
and
wop.
that fish will be another 20 feet
Got him.
away or
Got
something,
him, yeah.
past that.
So,
But,
so along those lines, I mean, how often do you miss? I mean, we see all the shots and they're like dead on. Like, man, these guys never miss. But I would imagine it's like the highlight reel, and you do miss occasionally, huh?
yeah, definitely. I would say, probably about a quarter of my shots I miss.
Okay, that's
Still
still pretty
pretty
good. Yeah. It's not like a baseball, right? Where 30% is
Yeah.
is good. So, and so relative to, I mean, so you say you've been diving here at the island. Have you dived anywhere else?
A little bit in Pacific mainland Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah, I went down to like Ixtapa, Zihuatanejo for a wedding, and I did a little bit of free diving over there.
And that area is also known for free diving as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys over there that actually do it. Wahoo and mahi, they go for a lot of like pelagic fish like that are pretty popular there. They don't have to go as far. Here we have to go really far for wahoo and things like that. So down there in mainland Mexico, they get them just a couple miles off the beach. 5 or 10 miles is all they have to do to get to deeper water, and they have those pelagic fish come in on them. I was down there for a wedding. A buddy of mine got married. So I went down there, and I actually didn't take a gun with me, but I dove a reef that was right off the shore. That's what we'll call shore diving. So I went shore diving off of a little rocky point, and saw some rooster fish.
Nice.
Oh,
and
cool.
then, I got a couple lobster with my hands.
I've seen people do that, specifically in Florida, where people kind of get up there and they have, it's basically, is it with the net or kind of with a stick in the net?
Yeah, everybody seems to have their own kind of method of doing it.
Yeah.
They'll have a lobster lasso, which is like a little noose kind of that they somehow tighten around it.
I use a hammer.
And you just crack them, right? And you just crack them and eat them. So.
Live action.
Yeah, and some guys use like a net, and they'll kind of like.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. Like I had one of my buddies was telling me about it. They do a lot of that in Florida. It's the same thing. It's a free dive, and kind of like the way a lobster will like shoot back the way a shrimp does. And so they get there and they put a net on it behind it, and then they tap it in the head. And then when he shoots back into the net, and then they go out there, and it's kind of they kind of get them that way. So what are some of the places though? So you mentioned Mexico, places in the world that are known for type of top spear fishing.
Yeah, so a lot of places in the Pacific, a lot of Pacific islands that are tropical. So like Tahiti, Japan, even, and Hawaii.
All the nice places that you go to. You're going to go on vacation and get out there and do some.
Do you have a bucket list of other places you want to visit that you plan to, or?
Yeah. So actually, in February, I have a trip planned to go to Costa Rica.
Nice.
That's a really good place too. Costa Rica, Panama, Ecuador. Those places tend to be really good. They get a lot of big cubera, snapper, or pargo. They call them pargo. Like down in Mexico, they call the snapper pargo. Well, they'll get great big ones, like 50 pounds plus.
Oh,
And they get a lot of wahoo, it seems like, in Costa Rica. I don't know 100%. It's not something I'm completely familiar with, but somebody that I know through the network of spearfishing recommended a guide to me, and I've been following him on Instagram, and he gets everything from big snapper to wahoo and yellowfin tuna down there in Costa Rica. So,
and how long have you been doing it? Like, is it since like year-wise?
about 10 years, but
Wow.
I've been really serious into about 4 or 5 years.
Have you seen a growth in popularity of it? Like, from when you first started to now? Is it
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot more people are doing it. I think it's kind of a new sport, so I think it can only really grow.
Yeah, because I know you said there's the community here in the valleys maybe 20, 30 strong. It doesn't seem very, very big, but it's interesting to know if it's growing. And now, do you think it's so small because of the ability or because of the, is it expensive? Is it just access?
Yeah, I think people get deterred. If the water is murky, you can fish with a fishing pole.
Correct.
But if it's murky, if you put all your eggs in one basket and you're like, oh, I'm geared up, I'm gonna go, and you go and it's murky, it sucks, and it kind of turns people off, I think. But it also kind of makes it good for developing a passion for it, because when you do go and it's really amazing, it's like one of those things where you just score the conditions, and you can really be like blown away at how blue the water is and what you see, things you've never seen before. So it's definitely, that's one thing that it's hard to deal with, but can be really rewarding. It's like the conditions are constantly changing. Every day is different when you go spearfishing. The current, the wind, and the water clarity is never, I feel like never the same.
That's always changing. It's just like fishing, right? You gotta learn how to work with what you're given for that day, and the wind and the current, and it's just a different application of it. So what kind of so we talked about holding your breath, right? And that kind of insinuates a certain level of physical shape, if you'll be in some type of shape. Do you have to be in any kind of swimming shape, or what's your physical conditioning that you have to be in order to dive?
Some of the really, like, the best divers in the world are pretty big guys. I don't think you really need a specific build. You just need a comfort level in the water. Starting off snorkeling is a really good start. If you can be really proficient in snorkeling, even in a pool or something, that'll help considerably, snorkeling in the ocean. And then from snorkeling, we just add a little bit longer fins.
Yeah.
And you initiate a dive via a duck dive, which is just basically you kind of bend at the waist and, drop your shoulders down and pick your feet up, and you go into a vertical kicking position, and you initiate a free dive. And when I first started doing it, I could only dive to 10 or 15 feet.
And now you're at 90.
Yeah.
Practice, a lot of
Yeah,
practice.
a lot of practice. So,
I love sitting in your couch and just.
is he constipated?
Let me ask you a question. So my son's 12 years old, and he recently got into water polo, so he's learning, how to swim and how to stay afloat. But something that he's talked about with me, he's not big into fishing, but since he was a kid, he's mentioned one day he'd like to go snorkeling or do some spearfishing. So at what age would you recommend to start training somebody, or what age can you take somebody out and say, hey, look, I can give you book a trip, and we're going to show you the basics. How old does the person have to be, if there's any age?
That really, it's up to the kid, I think. You want the kid to be comfortable at all times. If the conditions are really nice, I think you can go, relatively young, maybe even less than the age of 10. If the conditions are really nice. You just don't want to spook them. You don't want to put them in murky water where they feel uncomfortable, or they can't see fish and then fish come out of nowhere at them or something like that. You want it to be really clear. You don't want them to get swept away in the current, especially if the boat's sitting on anchor or something. So get them fitted with good fins and a nice mask that fits them, that doesn't fog up. Those are some basics that will really go a long ways, because you don't want to lose a fin. You don't want the mask to get so foggy that you can't see out of it, or the mask to leak and fill up with water. Those things will deter people or kids from
Just bad experiences in general, right? So try to keep them protected, sheltered, and kind of guide them and coach them along the way so that they kind of don't have any of these things, right? Anything that would deter them or kind of spook them, like you said. Especially at an early age, I would imagine that's hard to overcome, right? You have one bad experience and it just kind of like traumatizes you, like you don't know how to respond or react.
Weird that he doesn't like to fish, but he wants to get in the water.
This experience is just like they just
kind of
kind of
fun.
something different. Like he wants to do that. He wants to swim with whales.
With the whales. I was like, all right, bro, I'm going to go catch some trout, and you
I
can
would
go
think
catch something.
it would be like kayaking. I know the first time I tried even kayaking, I didn't even cast the pole at all. It was just more just kayaking.
I was like, I'm out on the
So
water.
I would figure it's the same
So
thing.
you didn't
where
kayak fish. You
No, I
kayaked.
just kayaked. So I figured this would be the same thing, where maybe you go out and not fish the first few times, just so that, and then start getting into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sometimes you don't see the wrecks from the surface. And, I've definitely had clients or, children of clients. I've had daughters and sons come out with their dad. And when they do a dive to like 20 or 30 feet and they actually see the wreck that's like laid out on the bottom, man, they get so excited just seeing a wreck,
Yeah.
That's
As
pretty
well as
cool.
kind of like seeing any kind of fish that's hauling around there. It's just cool. I mean, I like seeing the pictures and the videos of it when people dive, and it's like, oh, that's cool. And actually, my daughter was actually pretty into it too. As I was doing research last night, we were watching videos, and so she sat down with me. Oh, Daddy, look at that. Oh, Daddy, look at that. Oh, Daddy, how she was asking me, is he scared? What's going through his mind? And then she saw some sharks. Like, is the shark gonna eat him? I was like, no, she's not gonna. She's not. He's the shark. I don't think he does. And so
You're a good dad. I would have told my son, yes, keep on watching till the good stuff comes out.
Yeah. So let's talk about that experience you had. So I guess so swimming with a whale shark. I mean, I would imagine that's on a lot of people's bucket list. It's probably something that a lot of people want to do when they chase and they try to do it. Maybe some people are more fortunate than others. But how did that come to be?
So I've been wanting to do it for a really, really long time, and I would get so jealous when my friends were like, oh, we went out there and we saw a whale shark. I mean, I had some friends that I felt like never went offshore, and they went off on their shallow sport or something, and they saw it.
Those hurt, man. Those hurt.
But, so I had a couple buddies, and it looked like a really, really nice day, and I wasn't booked, so I contacted a couple of my friends and asked them if they wanted to go out with me. And, we went out there to those the jack-up oil rigs that are congregated out there. There's
Yep.
like, I think
That's
6.
where we went?
Yeah, where we went fishing. Yeah.
I think there's 6 of them right now. They're slowly dwindling away, unfortunately, but yeah, it's a great place to go fish or spearfish. We were there, got there pretty early in the morning, like 8:30, I would say, and our plan was to go even farther offshore to try to maybe get some mahi or some wahoo. And so we got there, we tied up, got geared up, got in the water, and we were spearfishing probably for like close to an hour doing a bunch of dives. And it was just absolutely gorgeous water. It was like one of those days. It's like 10 out of 10, probably 50 or 60 foot viz. And
Yeah, you only get a few of those days per year, right? Just like 1 or
Yeah.
2 days. That was it, and it just happened to line up. You weren't booked, and then kind of all the stars lined up for you.
Yeah, I just took advantage of the conditions, and I mean, it really paid off. And so we were doing some dives, and I remember doing a couple dives in like the 80-foot range, and just felt really, really good. Felt like, I was diving really well. I felt really comfortable, and we were communicating really well amongst each other, and we were all getting really nice fish. And I don't know 100% I don't remember exactly what we had gotten at that point, but I think one of my buddies that was there had gotten a cobia already. That it's in federal waters, so there's oil rigs, and you're allowed to get cobia, any game fish, any fish that's legal size, you're able to get on a spear gun in federal waters.
Okay.
So you're only limited to non-game fish within state waters. So we were past the federal water line, and my buddy, one of the first fish we got was a nice cobia that he brought up, and we had been diving for like an hour, about an hour, like I said, and we were just taking turns, and I did a dive that was probably my 10th dive, or maybe even more than that, into the trip that day, into that dive. And I was down at like 60 or 70 feet, and I leveled out, and I was kind of perched on one of the cross members of the oil rig, and I was trying to just keep my eyes open for any, I was especially looking for those African pompano that we get.
Yep.
They'll come in out of curiosity, sometimes out of the deep blue, and they'll just buzz the oil rig leg. So I was kind of perched there looking around, hoping to see something like that. And, all of a sudden I saw this black shadow, and I really honestly thought it was a boat shadow. And I was thinking, man, I didn't hear the boat pull up. The sound in the water travels really a lot better than it does above land, and you can hear the boat motor, whether it be an outboard or an inboard, for miles. I feel like, you can really hear sounds underwater. And I saw this, silhouette, and I was like, man, I did not hear that boat pull up. And I'm just like, I can't believe I didn't hear the boat. I see the shadow, but I didn't hear it. And as I sat there, my bottom time slowly dwindled away, and then I could just make out like this herd of cobia following that black shape. And I then made out the little white polka dots, and I realized that it was a whale shark down there at like 60 or 70 feet, just cruising by the rig. So
And you're at the end of your.
yeah,
Oh man.
I was already at the end of my dive. So I pushed off I tried to contain my excitement because that burns quite a lot of oxygen, and I just kind of pushed off the oil rig, and a little cheater way to get to the surface a little bit faster and with less energy. So I pushed off nice and gently, and then I kicked my way to the surface, and I started pointing to the other side at my dive buddies. And I think, I'm sure, like you said, we can't really communicate entirely.
Right.
So they knew I was excited about something, but I'm sure they thought it could have been anything between from a nice fish to,
An African
shark.
pompano.
yeah, a shark.
Something sound there.
Other than a whale shark or, something. And so I got to the surface, and I just yelled at them, there's a whale shark over there. It just swam by. It just swam by the rigs. And I didn't even wait, a second, man. I just turned and like kicked straight towards that whale shark where I
So
saw.
what happened to not being? What told you say earlier? You know, you gotta let your buddies know. Not this time. Go back down.
You know, I told them, I yelled at them, and they weren't far away at all. They were, you know, right there, 5 or 10 feet away. So when I told them, I was like, all right, I've done my part in letting y'all know that this epic thing is
About to
swimming
happen.
by. Yeah, about to happen. And I took off and I raced. And at that point, I didn't see the shark anymore at all. And so I kicked really hard, and I actually caught back up to it. And I could just see its tail going back and forth. And I didn't see as many cobia on it as I did at depth when it swam by. And so
It's still hanging around that 60-foot range.
it had come up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I was really surprised that it had come up to about 30 or 40 feet, and
Oh,
it was such a clear day that you could see it, like, you know, as clear, you know, all the detail on it. And so I was there like huffing and puffing.
This is what I trained for.
And I had just done a dive, and I then just sprinted after this thing, and I was like, you know, should I dive on it? You know, should I try to go get a cobia? What should I do? You know, I really didn't know. And so I kind of just assessed my situation and thought to myself, I think I feel good enough to do this dive. And if midway down I don't feel good, you know, I'll just turn around and abort the mission and go back up. And so I tried to rapidly do a breathe up and tried to relax myself really well. And I dove on, you know, right at the dorsal fin of this whale shark. And, you know, little did I know that it was, I should have known, it was moving in the water, but it swims a lot faster than you think. It's like, it acts like it's moving in slow motion, but it's moving at a pretty good pace. So when I actually got down to it, I just saw the tip of the tail going by. And I didn't see any of the cobia on it, and I was thinking like, oh man, did they spook already off of this fish? And I ended up getting down at about 40 feet, and I got to peep up underneath it, and they were all just like tucked in
In the shade, hanging
yeah.
out.
right underneath the pectoral fins of that shark. And I really, really wanted to get the biggest one out of the group, but yeah, it was a little too close to the shark.
But it was something bigger at that point, right? I mean, you've caught cobia before, and this is like a different experience, right? It's like I got to take it for what's in it now, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
So at this point, you have another buddy that came down to record, or you're still not recording?
No, I had recorded. I had started recording. Luckily, I hit the button on my GoPro.
Oh, so you had
and
it-
it was
you had it
recording,
mounted.
yeah, from my mask. And so, you know, I took a shot on one of those cobia, and I pulled it out, and you know, I don't know what would have happened if it would have tangled up in the shark or something like that, but I pulled it out of the shark or out from underneath the whale shark, and I surfaced, and you know, I tried my best to kind of walk this cobia around like a dog and continue following the whale shark. And at this point, my two dive buddies were sprinting like full speed.
try to keep up.
to where I was at, yeah. And
How far? I mean, how long? How far did you have to go, or did they have to go from where you guys were at?
You know, this was only probably 2 or 3 minutes, and we were not too far from maybe 100 feet from the actual oil rig.
Okay.
Out in the open water, and at that point they had caught up to me, and I was pointing ahead. You know, the shark's right here in front of me, 20, 30 feet, and that was I got that cobia up to me, and it went berserk, but I really think to this day that it almost fought itself dead, which I think the cobia do quite often. I've experienced it before. They just fight so hard that you know, you don't think you're going to get them. You think they're going to break the shooting line, which is like 300-pound monofilament. They fight so hard, and then all of a sudden they just tucker out energy, and you know, you're able to get a hold of them and wrestle them into you. And so I did that, and right at that point, I looked up, and that whale shark had kind of done like this loop, and it was swimming right in front of me. And you know, one of my dive buddies was down, like, literally, like, swimming with it, you know, touching it. And then my other dive buddy was actually trying to take another cobia off of it. And it was pretty fascinating. He told me that, you know, I can look at the shot that he took on the other cobia, and he was like, man, I had no idea how much water that tail pushed. You know,
Yep.
It's like it's moving so slow, but he was like, I could literally feel my gun, you know, when I was 10 or 15 feet behind it moving, you know, with the tail.
That's what I've heard. Like, so I was talking to someone about, you know, this and you know, that tail, if you have to know what you're doing when you're approaching this, and as well as when you're releasing, just because that tail is the energy that it's putting out can, a lot of people apparently get hurt, right? You know, it can easily whip you and suck you in, or not make it a bad day for you. So,
So which gun were you using when you were?
I used this one and with the reel on it, and at that point I had it. I had already reeled up all the line that cobia had taken, and I had the gun in one hand and the cobia in the other, and I was recording from the mask. And I was just trying to record the whale shark and record my dive buddies, you know, diving with it. And yeah, it was really cool. I ended up getting Bassam. He was actually one of the guys that was with me. I got the shot on the cobia that he got off of it, and I was, you know, you can watch in the video that he pulls the fish away from the whale shark, and then later goes on to land it. And then Dennis was another guy. He was the other gentleman with me, and he was actually, you know, the one that's swimming with the shark. And yeah, it was pretty amazing. The shark did 2 or 3 laps there around the oil rig. I don't know if it was able to feed off the krill or the plankton. I'm not even 100% sure what it eats.
I was
But
putting up a show, man. That's what it was doing.
it saw some cameras. That's it. Yeah,
oh,
it's lights,
GoPro
camera
action,
action.
GoPro
Yeah,
action.
GoPro. You heard the dee.
and I was able to actually follow it, and we went right by my boat, and I was able to throw the spear gun and the cobia up onto the boat, and then continue to record and continue to follow it around for probably another 5 or 10 minutes. And I did another dive on it where I was actually able to touch it and swim with it for a while. And man, it was really, really incredible. The size of it.
Yeah, I'd imagine that's
amazing,
like, yeah,
man.
that's like the experience. That's why you do it. I mean, that's probably on every spear diver, or every diver's, I should say,
you
bucket
catch-
list. Yeah.
Catch a 30-inch trout, and you're, you know, like, oh my god, I caught a 30-inch trout. I swam with a shark whale.
Yeah.
Okay, bro. That's freaking.
And
that's
I
awesome,
shot
man.
and I shot this big cobia that was under it too, as well
Oh,
too.
by the way,
So just one last thing there. So you said you shoot the cobia, and then you bring it in, and you wrestle it in,
Yeah,
and
you
that's
hold
kind of you hold him up, and you kind of
Yes.
carry him to the boat.
Yeah, so there's definitely a way to do that properly, because a lot of, you know, especially when I was getting into it, you can lose fish right there when you almost get them within arm's reach. You can also bend the shaft, which cobia are pretty good at doing that too. So yeah, you hand line the, you know, if it's on the reel or if it's on the float line, you hand line that line into you. And it's a really good idea to slowly swim forward, because if you hand line all that line in and it's right there with you, and you're not swimming forward, it bunches up right there underneath you. And you get this big tangled mess that you're swimming in, essentially, which can be really dangerous. So it's a really good idea to just kick just a little bit forward, you know, as you're bringing that line in to you, and it'll then trail off behind you and stay a lot more organized. And then when you get that fish into you, you know, whether it be a snapper or cobia or a mahi or whatever it is, you know, try to grab the back of your shaft, and then this big flopper will open and close. So it penetrates the fish, and then when that fish body tries to leave, it'll open it and it'll catch it. But a lot of times that fish will be sliding back and forth on the shaft as it's, you know, fighting against you. And if that flopper were to just click down like that, and
He's gone.
it lines up, it can slide right off. Yeah. So the best thing to do is try to, you know, calmly we usually get like super excited when this is going on, so it's pretty easy to like make it seems like a blur, but we usually slide our hand down the shaft once we get our hand on it. It's good to have a nice pair of gloves, like really thick gloves, even like mechanic gloves that are like rubberized. You can buy diving gloves, but really nice fitted mechanic gloves work just as good. You slide your hand down that shaft wearing gloves, and you actually hold the fish's body up against that flopper. And you kind of pin it there so that it can't slide back and forth, and you don't have any play in that flopper. And then that fish usually will start to swim and kick. If it kicks really hard, just kind of let it take you in a circle or take you wherever it's going to go. But if you can get that fish into like a bear hug, that's really the best way to take down bigger fish like amberjack or cobia, and just get them into a big bear hug. At that point, you should have the snorkel back in your mouth, and you just hug that thing and try to get your hands up into the
You wrestle it,
gills. Yeah, it's really like a wrestling match at that point.
So on top of like a long swim and holding your breath, now you got to wrestle.
Yeah, so you definitely got to be in shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, your son that plays water polo, he's probably used to it, man. Those guys are pretty mean sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just gonna if I ever do this, I'm just gonna go for small fish.
Small fish, right? So so when you're in the water, you still have the fish on the gun. You don't release it till you're on the boat. That's when you take it out of the gun.
Yeah. So we'll get up on the boat, and we'll either try to slide this flopper out, or we can unhook the shooting line and pull the shooting line all the way through. And if you're actually close enough to the fish when you take the shot, which ideally is what we do all the time, just because it secures the fish the best. But if you're really close, this shaft will actually go all the way through the fish, and then it'll be on this
Line,
shooting line. Yeah, and we call it lining the fish. And so when that shaft, if you guys look at the back where those tabs are at, we call those tabs shark fins. That's where the shooting line actually connects to the shaft. It's a little bit forward from the complete rear of the shaft. So there's probably about 4 or 5 inches back there where that shaft locks into the trigger mechanism. And it's really well designed on Koa. Not all the manufacturers do that, but if you line the fish and that shaft penetrates entirely through the fish, and then you pull back, it fights you and it puts pressure back on that shooting line. That shooting line will get pulled through the fish, and that shaft will actually turn sideways.
Okay.
And the whole thing acts like a flopper in that sense, and it becomes really difficult to pull that shaft through the fish when it's turned sideways like that. So
Yeah, because you got that entire shaft on there. Yeah.
And they make connectors for the end of the shafts called slip tips that essentially are like a little 3 or 4 inch tip that slides on and off the end of the shaft, and it's then connected to the shaft via a little hole that's drilled in it with very strong, like 500 or 700 pound Dynamo braided line. So slip tips, they work really well, but they can kind of be a pain in the butt. So it's always like a preference thing if you use slip tips or not. Typically for really hard fighting fish that their flesh can tear easily, like wahoo, people will use slip tips because they make securing the fish a little bit more of a guarantee. But the slip tip will penetrate through the fish, and then when the fish goes and pulls on it, that slip tip will be on the other side of the body of the fish, and it'll slide off the tip of the spear gun and turn sideways and kind of embed itself in the other side of the fish, secured by that Dyneema.
There's definitely a lot to it. I mean, for me, like it's just like I'm gonna shoot the fish, and then like all right, and I'm gonna wrestle them in. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of technology that goes into, or there's a lot of thought into what goes into these tools or these guns and the spears.
What was the brand again?
These are called Koa.
Koa.
What does a gun like that cost? Kind of just roughly.
Um,
Or how set up, right? The gun with just
yeah, there's about $800 or $900 setups.
It's not something cheap. I guess nowadays people spend that much on their rods and reels and
Yeah, there's they'll last a long time if you take good care of them. And then especially, if you're using a float line, it's really hard to lose the gun with a float line. So, you want to protect your investment, especially when you're getting, into the sport. So spend a little extra money, get a float line, get a float. Then, you kind of guarantee that you're not going to lose your gun, a little bit more so than on a reel. Reels are really cool because they kind of give you a little bit more mobility and freedom. The float line is dangled on the surface, and it can get tangled in the oil rigs or tangled in the boat or tangled in the buoy or whatever you're spearfishing around. So you kind of have to be down current of it. You can't go up current of it with a float line because it'll then get tangled.
In your way. Yep.
How long have you had these particular ones?
Let's see. So I've actually bought this one used, and I've only had it for about a year and a half. And it's actually a customer's gun. I lend that out. That one's my loaner gun. And then this one's my personal gun. I've had it for probably 3 years.
Is there any shops anywhere local or the island that carries things like this?
Some of the scuba diving shops, I think like Scuba Shack and U.S. Diving or American Diving. Yeah, American Diving at the island. They have a selection of spear guns. It's not necessarily the biggest selection, but they've got guns to look at and go feel.
Somewhere if you come down to the island, you can get something here. Whereas, I'd imagine, like we said, not a lot of people are doing it, right? So,
yeah, I order these guns from Austin's Dive Center out of Miami, and they have really incredibly fast shipping, really great customer service. You can call them up and talk to them and pick their brain about what you're thinking, what you're wanting to get out of the gun, and they'll give you really good advice. And then, if you do buy something from them, it comes in really fast. So I've had a couple customers that have asked me my recommendation on guns, and they've purchased through them, and they've been really happy. I've done it myself, and I've had customers, leave really good reviews.
Yeah, I mean, if you're out there spearfishing a lot, so you've gone through stuff, and you put these things to the test, and so you have a lot of confidence in the gun. So last thing, so I know we touched on it here briefly, but so someone that wants to get into this, so there's a class, a course to get dive certified, and how do you take that course? Where do you find information on that?
Free Diving Texas. You can Google it and find
Free Diving Texas.
Phillips' website.
And that takes you to Phillips' website. How long of a class is it, or how long does it take to get certified?
So there's a level 1, which is beginner, a level 2, which is intermediate, and a level 3, which is advanced. And it'll be 1 day for each section.
Okay. And to go fishing with you, it takes or to go offshore, it takes the basic, the 1 day class,
Yep.
and then you can go from there.
Yeah, at least the basic.
And that class is physically done in the valley, or is it outside?
It's in Austin.
It's in Austin. Okay.
Yeah, he does all of his diving on Lake Travis.
Okay. Good deal. So, and again, just one last time, George, will you tell everybody, our viewers, where they can find you online? And
so Texas Blue Water Rehab on Instagram or Facebook. I'll pop up, and you can get my number there, and feel free to call or text me at any time, or shoot me a message, and I'll be more than happy to respond.
Yep, I will definitely put your contact info on one of the notes here below on this video. So thanks again for coming out here. I know you drove all the way from the island, which for people who aren't familiar with where we're at and where the island is, about an hour, a little bit over an hour drive, and the weather outside is pretty crummy. So definitely appreciate you coming out there. We definitely encourage you to keep on putting these videos that you're doing out there and sharing your content. I mean, prior to seeing your stuff and stumbling across it really on Facebook, I had really never been aware of it. Really knew that people were doing this here in South Texas, and kind of, and then even just some of the experiences you've had, right? So you're just like, wow, this is right outside of our house, right? And just, it's really close by. And so definitely keep putting that stuff out. We definitely appreciate what you're doing to kind of increase the awareness and getting more people out there. And getting them on the water and kind of sharing your passion with other people and helping kind of expose them, right? It's not for everybody, right? So if you're not naturally in the water, if you don't have a certain level of comfort when you jump in that water, or if you see a shark, right, their first instinct is to jump out and not, take a picture and see if, how that
scream and run.
Yeah, see how that shark responds to your camera. But definitely, thank you for coming out here. We definitely appreciate having you. I learned a lot here. I'm sure everyone here, as well as our audience, did. So, for those of you guys who are watching our video, so thanks for staying tuned. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Be sure to like this video, and you also have a YouTube channel, right?
I do, yeah. So it's found at Texas Blue Water Rehab.
So Texas Blue Water Rehab is the name of the charter, the name of the YouTube channel, and we'll and as well you can find you on Facebook and Instagram. So thanks a lot, George, and we look forward to seeing more of your videos.
My pleasure.
Good stuff, man.
Thank you guys very much.
In my mind, I've got 'em big red on the line. That's where I go when I'm itching to feed my 7-day addiction.